Well, I'd like to now take you through the key steps in what I call the engagement analytics roadmap. There are 5 primary steps I'll review with you that provide really an organized and disciplined approach to conducting the engagement analysis and then applying these insights in your business. I'll certainly cover each of them in more detail on the following slides as well. Step 1 is really about collecting the data, collecting the engagement data. In step 2, which is certainly the step that I find very interesting, it's all about doing that initial customer engagement assessment. And I think you will find that this is one of the most enlightening steps the first time you go through this process as well. In step 3, it's all about starting to develop decision support tools that can help you really establish what those initial engagement goals are. And step 4 is about developing predictive analytics tools and operationalizing them. And finally, step 5 is all about the development of targeted programs that really seek to generate incremental customer engagement with your brand. You have to keep in mind as well that this is a very iterative process, and steps will need to be repeated to really maximize the benefit of engagement analytics over time. So let's review step 1. Conduct a data audit. I mentioned earlier that you want to create this customer journey or engagement map to highlight all of the important customer touch points that you have in your business. It's really during this auditing process that you'll need to determine across each of these touch points what is currently captured and what it would require to capture even more information if it's possible. You also want to create a data asset scorecard. You want to take the findings from the prior auditing process and create this initial engagement, I'm calling it an engagement data asset scorecard, that summarizes the current situation and highlights the largest data collection gaps that currently exist in your business. So I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slide. And finally, you want to monitor the usage of the data assets. My recommendation is to assemble a cross-functional work team to really monitor your company's consumption of the engagement data. This work team will also help cross-functional business leaders understand how to leverage some of these brand new data assets that they just acquired. So the scorecard really should provide a framework to assess your company's ability to collect information across, again, all the key customer engagement categories or touch points. Now, some of the data is self-reported by the customer, while other is transactional in nature, where it is also possible to infer customer engagement interests and preferences through their actual actions. For large businesses, it's also important to consider data sources that stretch across several business units. You want to be able to get a more holistic view of customer engagement. The assessment also should include an evaluation of the availability, the utility, and accessibility of the customer engagement information to all the business stakeholders. And finally, it should capture the current data collection priorities. So a few other thoughts I wanted to share on engagement data collection. Focus on deriving more value from aggregate online behaviors. I certainly understand that web browsing or things such as social mentions can be very difficult to capture at an individual level. However, they can and they should be included at an aggregate level so that you're at least considering them when correlating engagement behaviors to key business profit drivers. Also, several technological advancements are being made to draw more meaning from unstructured data. In fact, several companies are now using a process called natural language processing to both categorize content and assign sentiment scores to these interactions. These advancements now make it possible to use these data sources in a lot of the analytics that are being done. And finally, you need to be responsible, right? Don't forget that the goal to incorporate engagement data is to enhance the customer experience, not to irritate your customers. Next, let's move on to the critical step of the customer engagement assessment. The first task is to baseline engagement patterns in your business. Next, you want to correlate customer engagement to key profit drivers. In order to do this, you really want to incorporate multivariate analysis techniques, and this is something I'll explain more in a moment. So in order to effectively baseline customer engagement in your business, you need to develop engagement metrics that are both relevant and actionable. So, and how do you do this? A nice approach is to disaggregate your customers into unique groups using both segmentation and customer lifecycle frameworks. In this simple example, I've divided customers into 4 segments and 3 lifecycle groups. And it starts to become very clear that the metrics need to differ by lifecycle stage and certainly by the type of relationship that you have with the customers. For example, a critical engagement to assess for all new customers is their onboarding experience. Also, think about using this as a chance to listen to that voice of the customer. Ask about things such as product and channel preferences, which you can then certainly later use to tailor interactions with that same customer. In contrast, it could be important to listen for negative sentiment for customers in the win-back segment. These customers have already shown you that they've decided to leave your brand once in the past, and we certainly don't want that to happen to you again. So I won't go through all the different segments. However, the key point here is that it's important to evaluate a broad set of behaviors at this stage of the analysis, because subsequent steps, which I'll review with you, will help to identify the most impactful and influential engagement metrics that you really want to track in your business. The second key task in this step is to correlate now all of the identified engagement metrics to selected key business drivers. So in this case, we're correlating them to annualized customer profitability, but it certainly can be any key profit driver that makes sense in your business. Now, by using multivariate techniques, we can really begin to isolate the impact of each engagement factor on whatever selected profit driver you have. And in this illustrative example, the strongest positive driver of annualized customer profit is a measure of how frequently and consistently a customer interacts in this early life cycle. We've certainly found time and time again that generating early engagement with customers can have a long-term sustainable effect on future engagement and customer value. It's absolutely critical that you develop programs that promote this early engagement. Again, I won't go through each of the metrics, but just keep in mind that it's this type of process that will highlight and really help you focus on building customer engagement behaviors that have the greatest positive impact on business performance. In step 3, we begin to establish engagement goals. It is important that some of the new engagement metrics find their way into the overall set of business KPIs. They need to be visible to the business leaders. It's also important to start to develop scenario planning tools and track behaviors with what I call an engagement scorecard. I'll show you in the following 2 slides a couple mock-ups of some sample scenario planning tools and engagement scorecards, similar to things we've created for our clients in the past. The scenario planner uses the results of the multivariate analysis to help forecast the impact of changes in customer engagement behavior. So this helps you build a very well-informed business case that can support investments in programs that can drive, hopefully, incremental engagement and even more importantly, business growth. In this example, the scenario planner allows the user to change the distribution of customers across several different engagement dimensions, and then to quickly estimate the effect on business performance, which again, in this case, is annualized customer profitability. So once you've changed the currently observed rates of engagement to the new adjusted rates, which are shaded in blue here, you can see the estimated impact on customer profitability, which is shaded in yellow in the top right-hand corner. So in this example, which is similar to things we've seen in our own experience, getting even a modest number of additional customers to complete the onboarding process and getting more people to lower their interaction cycle or the length of time since their last interaction, and finally getting some people to go from one product category purchased in that first year to a second. All of these types of behaviors combined can have a very significant impact on your business, and it's shown in this case to take the average customer profitability from $25 to $30, which would be a 20% increase. The engagement tracker also allows you to get a very early and ongoing view into progress made or possibly not made towards your new customer engagement goals. But by doing this, it provides your business adequate time to course correct and then try alternative engagement building programs if they're necessary. Step 4 is about operationalizing the engagement analytics. In this step, you want to utilize timely data to predict future engagement behaviors. If you recall, I mentioned that industry analysts believe the key to developing customer experiences is to use relevant historical information to predict future outcomes. Right? So the objective of this step is really that, predict those future engagement behaviors. It's also important to integrate these predictive engines to manage delivery of both proactive and very targeted engagement building programs. So the analytic engines that are depicted in the columns here should incorporate both early and ongoing engagement data. This will certainly help you to provide up-to-date predictions of future engagement behavior across the entire customer lifecycle. Again, that's very important. The ongoing predictions will provide that structure to really trigger timely, very targeted engagement building programs. So in this case, it's certainly showing that it's about sustaining engagement with your most engaged customers, and it's all about building incremental engagement with lower or even unengaged customers. But it's these types of scoring models that can be implemented within regular system updates so that it can provide key stakeholders with really timely access to the latest scores in engagement predictions. What's also great is that the model drivers of future engagement can also be used to understand why a customer is expected to have lower engagement. It's then possible to start to develop personalized programs considering the specific drivers of lower engagement for each of these customer segments. So in this example, 3 separate subsegments begin to emerge from customers that are expected to have lower future engagement. There are the customers that have lengthening interaction cycles, where the objective would be to re-engage these customers and hopefully preempt possible attrition. There are also customers that might be scored low because they have very narrow product consideration, where the objective would be different. Here, it's about education and cross-selling. And finally, there are customers that may be reducing the number of interaction channels they're using, and the engagement building priority for these folks would be to make sure you're using their preferred channels more often. So the final step in the process is program development and in the integration of a very, I'll call it, rigorous test and learn process. You want to focus on high-impact customer engagement building opportunities. You need to remember, use the scenario planning tools to both help size and prioritize those opportunities. And it will also be important to think about how to leverage these insights across both outbound and inbound business applications. You also want to design tests to maximize learnings and validate relationships between customer engagement and business impact. It certainly is possible to see some degradation in business impact of incremental engagement, certainly when it's prompted by some new outbound or inbound programs. So it is very important to understand and account for those differences if they do exist. And finally, you want to measure results and refine the programs. You absolutely need to understand that this is not a one-time program. Instead, it really is a commitment to ongoing test and learn and program refinement. So I want to wrap up by just doing a quick recap of the 5 steps in the engagement analytics roadmap. Step 1 is to create a plan to improve engagement data collection. Step 2, you perform an analysis to understand the correlation between engagement and key business profit drivers. And in Step 3, you'll begin to use the decision support tools to establish engagement goals and track progress with scorecards. Step 4, which the analyst community said was so important, you need to really begin to operationalize engagement-driven predictive analytics. And finally, in Step 5, develop programs that focus on the most impactful engagement building opportunities. So a couple of closing thoughts. Use engagement analytics to inform the broader customer experience strategy. Remember, every day your customers are leaving you clues on how they want to interact and engage with your brand. Therefore, it's critical that you take advantage of this information, and use it to enhance that customer experience. You also want to take advantage of engagement data that you have today while you build out a more comprehensive data collection plan. Technologies and interaction channels will continue to change at a very rapid pace, I can promise you that. Therefore, leverage what you have today, certainly understanding that the data sources will continue to evolve and you need to evolve along with them. And finally, approach the engagement analytics roadmap as an iterative and evolving process to maximize the benefit. You really need to make a long-term commitment to this practice if you really want to think about making it a sustainable and strategic asset for your business.